Most people think they are asking financial questions when they come in to meet with an advisor and initiate a conversation. But what we found is they're asking oftentimes something much deeper. So, welcome to Paladin Financial Talk. I'm your host, Nikki Foley, and today I'm joined by featured advisor, Mr. Matthew Bryant. Matt, glad you're here today.
Good to be here. It's been a while since we did one together.
I know I always love this, and I always have to
That's right.
share that we're brother and sister,
Mhm.
and it is one of the highlights that I get to work with Matt on a daily basis. And so
Thank
when
you.
we get to do things like this, it's even the
Mhm.
cherry on top of things. And so
Absolutely.
in this series, so we're on show number 3 or episode number 3 in our series of breaking down the most common financial questions that people ask. And oftentimes, like I foreshadowed there's usually something more that is underlying in the question. And so in this episode, we're going to explore those misconceptions behind the questions, how to reframe it, and just get to that deeper truth. And so, Matt,
Okay.
I'm sure you're excited to get into that deeper
That's
truth
right.
side of things. But let's take a little bit to talk about you for a second before we actually dig into the topic. And so, Matt has spent the last 15 years in the
Mhm.
financial services industry, and he served in multiple roles within the industry. So he started in really more of a back office capacity and providing client services support. And then he worked for a portfolio management firm where he helped financial advisors with their clients. And
Mhm.
now today we have you sitting as a financial advisor. And I couldn't be more proud that we have the opportunity to work together on a daily basis at Paladin Financial. So you're a licensed investment advisor, which
Correct.
means you've done some testing to get
That's right.
there. And so you hold your Series 6, 63, as well as your 65, which
Mhm.
makes you a fiduciary.
Correct.
And then you
Yep.
have your life and health licenses as well. So we're big on educating clients. It's a kind of a hallmark of us as an organization. And so what else should we talk about as it relates to you and anything I might have missed along the
Yeah.
way?
Yeah. So I got into the industry, like you said, doing back office support and client services support. Even as I've transitioned to become an advisor, we are still absolutely client services first, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what role you have inside the organization. We're always doing our best for the clients, right? That's how we've built this thing, and that's what we'll always do. Um, Going deeper into my background, though, so I come from a long line of educators.
Yeah.
So parents were teachers until shortly after I was born. So high school teachers. Uh, Grandparents on one side were educators. One of them even helped start a community college because he saw the need for education. Aunts and uncles, just across the gamut, a lot of educators and then a lot of highly educated people
Yeah.
to go along with it in all industries, not just financial services. But that's been, I think, a big deal to me is not just, you know, saying we got this under control, but actually helping people to be educated on what we do because it's a very complex industry and there's a lot of moving parts. And so I want people, as much as they want to be educated, let me help you. And we do a lot of things outside of just our one-on-one meetings, but like all the education events and things like that, we'll talk about later. But definitely big on making sure people get the education they want.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we all look at the world through our own lens, and the people side is what really
Hmm.
is my motivator. And so helping people really, like you said, meet them where they're at with what they want to know, but knowing that we are a resource for them. We're here to
Hmm.
make their lives as simple as possible in this realm where it might not be of interest or it's just something that they don't comprehend. And so I'm proud that we can spend that time with people, and we're not just looking at, you know, kind of the how fast can we work with people? How can we get things
Right.
done? It is making sure that we actually have real
Hmm.
relationships along the way. Well, is there anything else that you want to share as it relates to your resume or
Yeah.
anything that might be important?
So my previous role in the industry, I worked with advisors that had clients themselves to help them implement proper investment strategies to use with those clients. A lot of those clients were approaching or were in retirement. So working with a couple hundred advisors who then themselves had a couple hundred clients, I've seen all kinds of different questions, been through all kinds of different stock markets and economies. So understanding how people think and what they're going through when things aren't behaving like they should in the world around us definitely has helped me understand the psychology of what actually goes into investing because it's not just the numbers in the financial markets. It's how do you feel about your money that you've worked so hard for, and how can I help you understand what's happening and help you sleep easier at night?
Yeah. If you ever have an opportunity to sit with Matt, it is impressive to listen to him and see him in motion because he has had this breadth of experience with not just what happens in our organization, but in advisors' offices all across the United
Mhm.
States and the different experiences. He certainly has just, like I said, the depth of knowledge and experience. And I would say this about you is you do a really naturally good job of taking something complex and making it simple. We do not have to overcomplicate any of
Right.
this. Let's bring it down to the values, the things that are of importance to
Mhm.
you, and then make sure we meet you with where you're at and your level of knowledge.
Yeah, let's not make it more stressful than it needs to be. So,
So as we talk about that and we move into this
mhm.
next, the real question that we're focusing on is what is the number one question or concern that you hear from prospective clients when you sit with them?
What I've heard this several times over the last few months is pulling it all together. So, a person might come to see us for a whole variety of reasons, but what I've learned when talking with them is we're going to go through a lot of different topics when we meet with you. They time and time again have said, I go out there and I research one particular topic. Maybe it's learning as much as I can about Social Security or Roth conversions or what, pick your financial topic. But what they struggle with is finding a resource that pulls everything together because all these things, whether you understand it or realize it or not, are very closely intertwined.
Mhm.
So a decision you're making over here regarding Social Security or contributions or distributions, whatever it may be, it's going to impact all the other financial things going on in your life because there's different thresholds and rules and all kinds of things like that. So what I've heard is, how do I tie all this together? Because I can research one topic and get an answer, but nothing out there is pulling this all together. And I think that's what we do a good job of, is saying, hey, kudos for doing the research you've done, but here's how all those different pieces play off one another.
Yeah, absolutely. My brain is just going through
Mhm.
example of that. But do you have one that you wanna share with our listeners that's more specific of where somebody has come to you with that perspective?
Yeah, so when to start Social Security,
Yeah.
that's a huge one. We spend a lot of time talking about that. We do presentations around the Twin Cities focused on that. Um, so that's a big one I get. People are fairly emotional about it oftentimes. Some wanna start it as soon as possible, others wanna wait, all kinds of different answers in there, but rarely do they have all the information on how the variety of topics overlap. For
Mhm.
example, in Minnesota, where we're sitting right now, Minnesota at a certain point still taxes Social Security. Not a lot of people knew that. We're one of the last few states that does that. And if you don't have a plan on how you're going to distribute the rest of your assets, you may wind up with paying more in Social Security taxes, both to the feds and the state. And then something that you're very familiar with is Medicare surcharges. So there's other things to be mindful of. It's not as simple as saying, hey, give me my income over here, because it ties into all these other things. And so people step back and say, I'm paying that much in taxes for Social Security, or wait a second, now my Medicare premiums are going to be
Mhm.
higher, or my tax rate has jumped to a new bucket. There's all kinds of deductions that were passed last year that have income thresholds as well. So it's just trying to step back and say, okay, here's our goal. And there's a lot of different ways to get there. What's the most efficient way to do so?
As soon as you said this, my first thing that I thought of was the Medicare side of it and
Mhm.
the IRMA, and you just don't know what you don't know
It's
until you have an aha, common sense language put in front of you and somebody else is helping
yeah.
you connect those dots. And you can read all you want, but sometimes there is lingo or language that doesn't resonate with you, and it can be a really important
Yeah.
key as part of that conversation and so forth.
Our tax code and Medicare to me is unnecessarily complicated,
Yeah.
which, I mean, we're here to help navigate that for you, but you can easily make a very expensive mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times in these scenarios, because it is related to taxes or it's related to a government process, there is no undoing it. And
Yeah.
there may
Yeah.
be a consequence, whether it's a tax penalty or, some type of surcharge that you can't get out of.
Mhm.
And it is a forever decision. And so back to that conversation of pulling all the pieces together and having a professional in your corner, this is where it probably is one of the most impactful places.
Absolutely.
So, misconceptions that might go along with this that, I take it from where we started with you can research and you can do a lot on the individual topics.
Mhm.
Pulling them together is a more difficult piece of this. But when people ask you or come to you with that conversation, is there any misconceptions that go behind that?
Just I'll stick with Social Security.
Yeah.
As we know, not everything we see on the internet is true. So there are reliable sources out there, but there's also a lot of people that take reliable sources and put their own spin on it, which then gets to be misinformation. I like talking about Social Security. So if I'm sitting with somebody for the first time and they are in their 30s or 40s, I ask them, "What are your thoughts on Social Security?" A lot of times they say, I'm not planning on it.
Yeah.
I'm not planning on being able to draw a benefit. I know I'm paying into it. I just think it's going to be, if it exists at all, significantly different. Because I'm 40 years old. I've been hearing about Social Security since I remember
Mhm.
that it's going to go away. It's going to go bankrupt. Personally, I think it'll exist in some capacity, but I ask that question of the younger clients. And then of people that are on the cusp of retirement, I ask them the same thing. Like, what are your thoughts on it? For the most part, they think it's going to exist. But then we also need to know, what is your plan for where are you going to live in retirement? What
Mhm.
state? I mean, because Minnesota, again, we still tax Social Security. We're in a higher income tax state. If you tell me you're going to move to Florida or some tax friendly state, that changes how we do the planning. Also, are you going to work in retirement? A lot of people wind up going back to work before they hit their full retirement age. That's going to impact how much of your Social Security benefit that you get to keep. So there's all kinds of factors to be considering
Yeah.
as to when you actually pull a trigger. Because, like you said, undoing that's pretty hard to do, and you just have the proper planning in place, and you don't have to worry about it.
I might be stealing your thunder here, but what I've seen you do just in this small bit of a conversation is you're asking more
Hmm.
questions, which then helps them frame it in a way that there's more perspectives to lend
Yeah,
to the situation.
yeah, and I mean, we know it up here because we have a lot of snowbirds, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people just go down for the winter, not necessarily 6 months, but if that is something you're considering doing, well, that changes pretty significantly what we're gonna do from a planning and distribution standpoint. So your advisor should be asking you these questions
Yeah.
because we need to know what your future looks like, not just what it looks like as you sit here right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And then back to that conversation of what are the other things that it impacts? Do you think Medicare and all kinds of other
Mhm.
things that it touches? I think, and I'm going to again use an example here is you can sit and read an article and there's often terminology that is synonymous for each other. So that can be a confusing piece. And then you have to just you don't even know the right question to you don't know what you
Mhm.
don't know, so you don't know the right question to ask to tie into it, and what people find along the way is you make a decision over here, which then has prongs and it touches
Right.
5 other things, 3 other things, and those are where you can get into your costly decisions that you
Mhm.
can't undo, and it's not intentional, it's not for lack of effort, it is you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So, in your experience, is there a deeper truth or an underlying concern that goes along when people come in and they're asking these questions, and you're asking the questions back? Anything to go along with that?
So we deal with people's nest eggs,
Yeah.
right? So the money that they've worked hard, you've made a lot of sacrifices over the last 20, 30, 40 years to get that money. There's naturally an emotional attachment to all this, and the fear of making the wrong decision is real. And we see it whether it's tied to the stock market, when to start Social Security, the types of money to be invested in as far as tax planning goes. So it can be overwhelming. Most people, in my experience, were told and understand that at some point in the past, they needed to invest. You needed to take a little bit from every paycheck and put it into an account and invest. The advice stopped there.
Yeah.
So, okay, but of the thousands of funds or portfolios out there, how do I invest? And is that portfolio I set 10 years ago still the right one now? Should I be doing Roth contributions or pre-tax? Should I do accounts outside of that? So yes, from a higher level, I'm supposed to be saving and investing, but then it starts to get overwhelming when you try to figure out how to invest. And then we know nothing goes smoothly like we want it to. So what happens emotionally when a war breaks out or an economy goes into recession? Like, are you going to make a rash decision that completely derails what you've been doing for the last 15 years? You need to have somebody in your corner that can say, hey, I understand what's happening. Here's why we should do X, Y, Z to make sure that you don't undo many, many years of hard work.
As you were describing that, Matt, what was going through my mind is there's really a spectrum here. And oftentimes people will fall in one end or the other. One being analysis paralysis, where they hesitate and they don't make any decision, which is a decision, but they make no decision, or they are recklessly moving forward just so they get it off their plate, or it's an anxiety inducing thing and they just need to move it.
Yeah.
And so when you get to one of those scenarios, like, you do need to stop. You need to
And have an
ask
expert.
question. Yeah.
Have an expert in your corner. We do this a lot.
Yeah.
And we've seen a lot of situations. All of us have quite a bit of experience. So reach out to an expert.
Do you have any other real world examples that play into this? Because I feel like my brain is going through a whole lot of them. But what about you?
The mortgage.
Yeah.
And I've talked about this on the show before, and we talk about it internally with the other advisors at Paladin, but the battle for paying off the mortgage early. Now, a lot of new home buyers are paying extra on their mortgage because their interest rates are 6.5%.
Sure.
We have a lot of clients that have older mortgages or refinanced during COVID, and their interest rates are 2.5 to 3.5, which is a fantastic interest rate. To us, that's an opportunity. If you are going to pay extra, we want to look at, hey, if that $1,000 or $500 or whatever it is was put towards the mortgage, how much would you save? Which is basically your interest rate. Now, if you took that money and did something else with it, something positive, I'm not saying just go out and blowing it, but like invested it because you didn't max out your Roth IRA yet, or any other type of investment account that you're eligible for. What does it look like to try to beat your interest rate? 3%, not hard to do over a long period of time. So is that money better served being invested to keep growing your net worth, knowing that, yes, you might have your mortgage for longer. Also, the mortgage can be tax advantaged, so you could get a deduction off your taxes for that. But a lot of people have an emotional attachment to it where it's like, I was told to not have this or get it paid off as soon as possible. I'm getting out of it no matter what it takes to do. And I've had clients ask me about taking IRA distributions to pay off a 3% mortgage. It's like, be mindful that when you take that IRA distribution, you have to pay the state and the feds taxes, and then you're going to pay off your mortgage. So is that better off than keeping your money and just paying the minimum? So it's an emotional thing, the mortgage. You've had it for a long time, but you really need to step back and look at the numbers, because that's a battle I fight constantly.
Yeah. As you were describing this, and I was going back to my spectrum, like ding, 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 the emotional pieces of it are going off in my head. Like all I'm hearing is the emotional part that I'm hearing you describe as it's laced in between that technical aspect of it. And so whether we want to believe that about ourselves or not, the deeper truth is there are usually emotions that are driving a lot of your decisions, your opinions, or perspective. And so having somebody alongside of you to help you navigate that and help provide some additional explanation, or potentially help support you as you're making decisions, is a key piece of this. So for our listeners and some of the takeaways, when you're sitting across the table from a prospective client and you hear questions that we've been talking about, what do you hope is the next step for them? Or probably a second half of this question is, do you give them any homework as listeners are listening to this homework? What can they do ahead of time before coming in?
First, I like it, especially when I'm sitting down with somebody for the first or second time, when they have lots of questions. Again, more questions, the better, because I don't know what you don't know. You might not know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Ask away. If you think it's stupid, just ask, because we need to educate you on that. Someone in the past has probably already asked that question, so we're here to help you do that. To me, the person that asks a lot of questions, or maybe the person that has done a little bit of research, that tells me they're serious about this, and they're not just blindly hoping for the best. And so the person that has that mindset is going to have a greater chance of success than the person that doesn't take it seriously and is just, oh, I'll figure it out down the road. So I like the questions. I like hearing from clients. I like being able to have those dialogues back and forth. Resources, or I guess common things that I task people with are pretty basic, but they're off. It's a consistent theme is how much are you actually spending?
Mhm.
I get that. I get it from 25-year-olds. I get it from 65-year-olds. We think it's 4,000. We think it's 8,000. It's like, we need to know, because all too often I've seen someone say it's X amount, and then a year, 2 years later, they're taking all these distributions from their account. And it's like, hey, did something happen? It's like, no, I just need this to live off of. We are building a plan to account for what you need plus contingencies. But if you're spending 50% more than that, your plan is going to blow up.
Mhm.
So that is the big one. I'm going to task you. I'm not going to necessarily ask where's all your money going unless it's particularly egregious, but do you actually have a grasp on what your spending is? And then how much are you able to save on a monthly or an annual basis beyond that? So that's a big one. I find surprising that people don't actually know where their money's going.
Yeah, it makes me actually chuckle that, I don't know how many times I start our conversations and like our meetings of, I'm going to ask a stupid question. I've been doing this for almost over 20 years in the industry, and I am still asking questions. And
Yeah.
so being really vulnerable in that respect when you come in with a financial advisor and you do that initial meeting or even in a 15-minute consultation, just to ask away.
Yeah.
Ask away, because
It's
with changes in legislation and laws, I mean, the questions just keep coming.
Yeah, it's okay not to know everything. And we spend a lot of time internally in training and meetings to try to keep up with everything that's happening. There's still going to be things we don't know, but we have experts that we work with that can help us along the way as well. I can't imagine somebody who's not in this industry that has a full-time expertise doing whatever it is outside of this, trying to also navigate everything that goes into it.
Yeah,
So
100%.
ask away. Like, I don't pretend to know anything about cars or medical or whatnot. Like, I go to experts that know those things because I know that's where you spend all your time. And hopefully when I ask stupid questions there, right, I'm going to get a good answer. So same thing in our industry. It's
Yeah.
not easy.
Matt, you have shared something with me that I thought was really insightful, that oftentimes people who are in a specialized role within the workplace
Mhm.
are very comfortable asking questions and asking for a professional to be in their life.
Yeah.
Others who are maybe more generalized and have a requirement to be generalized have a harder time approaching this. And so, will you just talk about
Yeah.
that for a
Yeah.
moment?
That's something we've talked about internally, and we've noticed it with clients is the person who is a specialist in their field, whatever it may be. They probably got there because they mastered their particular craft, but they also probably weren't afraid to ask questions along the way and have support and say, hey, I know I'm not the best at this. Let me surround myself with people that are. That's going to help me grow my career. The same thing when it comes to the financial services, like, hey, those people seem to realize more that there's a lot of nuance to this. And I want to work with somebody who has the expertise. Those people are intelligent. They could figure out and do a generally okay job with
Yeah.
their financial plan, but you're never going to be able to do as good a job as if you work with somebody who does this all day, every day. The experts that spend their time outside of this job researching more about it. So it is true, those that are experts themselves tend to be more willing to bring in other experts in their life because they see the extra value.
I bring that up because of, wrapping up this conversation with the deeper truth of, it is human nature on a lot of things to behave in a certain way. And in a scenario where you have been conditioned most of your career to be a specialist
Mhm.
versus a scenario where you have been conditioned to be a generalist, you only know what you know. And that might be something you're bringing to the table in your financial world as well, is that you feel like you must be all knowledgeable when you have been conditioned as a generalist. And the
Yeah,
reality is that could be something that is impacting you when you're thinking about your finances, and that taking a step back and saying, is that me? And maybe I do need support or help in an area that just hasn't
right.
been your number one. So, as we wrap things up here, I would say Anything else? I think I asked you about resources. Anything else you want to share with our listeners before we close out?
Our website, paladinfinancial.com. We have all these podcasts. We have old webinars. Like, we have a lot of good resources for education. Personally, and this is not so much current events necessarily, but there's a website called Investopedia, and that's good for trying to understand the basics of all things economy, stock market, bond market, just understanding how all the different things in the world kind of play off each other. Um, and it can be as basic as, what is a stock, what is a bond. There's some of the basics that you probably hear thrown around that people may not truly understand, but that's a great resource for education. And then this extends beyond just financial services, but understanding where your news is coming from, right? And if you're going to read one opinion on something, if it's an opinion, make sure you get a couple different, because you don't want, if you're focusing on just one source, you're probably blind to what some other actual things are happening around you are. So just try to consume as much as possible and maintain an objective opinion when you're trying to digest everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good reminder with the world that we're living in right now, is to take that next step and,
Mhm.
make sure you have more than one resource along the way. And so as we wrap things up, I would say what Matt has brought to us today is how does all of this tie together?
Yeah.
And there is nothing wrong with not knowing how this all ties together. It is a very rich and deep industry, and there's so many perspectives, and you don't know what you don't know is the theme I keep coming back to. And whether we like it or not, there are emotional pieces that go along with
Mhm.
this, and you only know how you have been conditioned all the way through. And so, if you're new to potentially working with a financial professional, I'd like to offer you a download as part of our conversation today. And it's questions to ask a financial professional as you're interviewing them and seeing if there might be a right fit. I think Matt has done an excellent job of giving some of the hallmarks about how we approach things and who we are, from the education piece, from slowing down and being really vulnerable as you ask questions and trying to make sure it aligns with who you are. So if you're interested in taking the next step, again, I'd encourage you to get that download from the show today. But also, we have set up 15-minute complimentary
Mhm.
consultations that you can do. And you mentioned our website at paladinfinancial.com. In the top right corner, there is a link that says booking. Any one of our advisors would be happy to have that 15-minute consultation. So go out there, look under the booking link, book 15 minutes with Matt or any one of our financial advisors. Or if you want to just pick up the phone,
Yeah.
651-842-8406 is our phone number, paladinfinancial.com. And then follow us on our social media. Matt talked a lot about how we're constantly putting out new episodes for our podcast on our social media. We use it as part of that. So YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, you'll continue to gather the information that you're looking for by just following along with us along the way. Anything else, Matt, before we wrap up? Wow.
No, if you're sitting there listening and you say that sounds like me, like, I know a decent amount about these things, but I don't know how it all wraps together. Call us. Like, this is your nest egg. This is what you're working your life for. Have somebody in your corner that can help you navigate it, because we see some costly mistakes and we want to help you avoid that as much as possible.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for that wrap up, Matt. And thanks for listening today. And we'll see you on our next episode.